The wind cut through Ava's sweater like icy knives. Her breath came out in small white clouds, fading quickly in the cold Christmas Eve air. From where she stood on the porch, the warmth inside the house looked almost unreal. Golden light spilling from the windows, voices overlapping, bursts of laughter rising above the clinking of forks and glasses. She pressed her fingers to the frosted glass, trying to warm them, but it only fogged the view. Still, she could make out her father at the head of the long dining table, his back straight, a glass of wine in hand. He looked happy. Or maybe he was just pretending. Carla sat next to him, a red silk dress catching the light, her dark hair perfectly curled. She leaned in close to his ear, whispering something. A second later, the table erupted in laughter. Ava's father chuckled too. Ava swallowed hard. He hadn't looked toward the door once. Her toes had gone numb hours ago, or maybe it had only been minutes. Time didn't feel real in this cold. She rubbed her arms, but it didn't help. She could still smell the roast turkey from inside, the scent sneaking through tiny cracks in the door. Carla suddenly turned her head and spotted Ava through the window. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Carla's lips curled into a slow, deliberate smirk. She stepped closer, resting her hand on the curtain. She didn't break eye contact as she pulled the fabric shut. The house disappeared from view. The cold felt sharper now, the night quieter. Without the sight of the table, the laughter from inside sounded farther away, muffled like it was coming from another world entirely. Ava's phone was dead. She'd forgotten to charge it after using it all morning. Her coat was hanging on the rack inside, useless to her now. Tiny snowflakes started drifting down, catching in her hair, melting against her cheeks. She told herself she wasn't going to cry. Crying out here would feel like letting Carla win. But her chest hurt, and the more she fought it, the more her throat burned. She turned toward the street, scanning for a neighbor's porch light, some sign of life that wasn't locked behind that door. But the only light behind her came from the house, the one she was no longer welcome in. And she didn't know why she still hoped her. When Ava was 10, her whole world changed in one night. Her mother had been driving home from work when a truck ran a red light. The phone call came just after dinner. Her father had sat on the edge of her bed, holding her small hands, and promised, "It's just us now, kiddo. I'll always be here." She believed him. For a while, he kept that promise. They made pancakes on Sundays, watched old movies late at night, and sometimes ate takeout on the floor because it felt like a picnic. Ava missed her mom every single day, but she felt safe with her dad. Then 2 years later, Carla arrived. Carla was beautiful in the way people in magazines are beautiful: flawless hair, perfect makeup, clothes that looked expensive. She smiled a lot in front of other people, but her eyes always seemed to be calculating. At first, Ava tried to like her. She thought maybe it would make things easier. But it didn't take long to realize Carla didn't see her as part of the family. She saw her as something to manage. Carla had a way of making Ava feel small without ever raising her voice. She'd say things like, "You should try a little harder with your hair, honey," or, "No wonder you're tired. You're always staying up late studying." To anyone else, it sounded like advice. To Ava, it felt like tiny cuts, one after another. Her father never seemed to notice. If anything, he grew more distant. Carla would quietly tell him that Ava had been snapping at her or avoiding chores, and Ava could see the way his expression changed, like he was slowly losing patience with her. The talks they used to have turned into short, awkward exchanges. Sometimes he didn't answer her texts at all. By the time Ava was in high school, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place where she had to watch every word, where even closing her bedroom door for too long could lead to a lecture. Carla had rules for everything: how late she could stay out, who she could spend time with, even which clothes were appropriate. Ava wasn't allowed to have friends over without asking days in advance, and the answer was usually no. Still, Ava tried to focus on her future. She was getting good grades, joining clubs, and aiming for a scholarship. She had one close friend, Lily, who made her laugh and reminded her that the world was bigger than this house. The two of them had a plan. Once Ava got into college, she'd move out and finally be free. But tonight had gone wrong long before she ended up on the porch. It started with her college application essay. She'd been working on it for weeks, pouring her heart into every sentence, writing late at night when the house was quiet. That morning, she'd opened her laptop to finish it, and the file was gone. Carla had been using the computer earlier to order holiday decorations. When Ava asked about it, Carla tilted her head and said, "Oh, I must have closed it without saving. You should have backed it up, sweetheart. Maybe you're just not ready for college if you can't keep track of things like that." Ava felt the heat rise in her face. "You deleted it on purpose," she said before she could stop herself. Carla's smile didn't even flicker. "That's quite an accusation." Her father walked in at that exact moment. Ava thought maybe he'd listen, maybe he'd see through the act. But Carla spoke first, her voice calm and hurt. "She's been yelling at me all morning, and I don't even know why." It's Christmas Eve, and she's spoiling the mood. Ava tried to explain, but her father's face had already closed off. Enough, he said sharply. We're not doing this today. By the afternoon, Carla had decided Ava would stay in her room during the family's Christmas dinner. We need a stress-free evening, she'd said, her tone sweet but firm. Ava had planned to go along with it, eat quietly in her room, then sneak out to meet Lily after dessert. But when she tried to take a plate of food upstairs, Carla blocked the hallway. Not tonight, she said, her hand resting against the wall like she owned the space. Before Ava could react, Carla guided her toward the front door, opened it, and gave her a small push. The lock clicked behind her. That was hours ago. And now, the warmth of the house and the smell of Christmas dinner were still just a few feet away. Ava had been holding it in all morning, but by the afternoon she couldn't stay quiet anymore. She found Carla alone in the kitchen, checking the timer on the oven. You deleted my essay, Ava said, her voice low but shaking. Carla didn't even look surprised. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel. If you were more careful, this wouldn't have happened. Maybe you're just not ready for college yet. Ava's hands curled into fists at her sides. Don't twist this. You knew how important it was. You did it on purpose. Carla sighed like she was the one being wronged. You really need to watch your tone, sweetheart. Before Ava could respond, her father walked in. His eyes moved between them, and for a second, she thought this was her chance to explain. She's been yelling at me all morning, Carla said quickly, her voice soft and wounded. I don't even know why. I wasn't. Ava started, but her father cut her off. That's enough, he said firmly, his jaw tight. We're not having this fight today. It's Christmas Eve. Ava stared at him, hoping he'd at least let her finish, but he had already moved past her to check on the food. Carla gave her a small, victorious smile when he wasn't looking. The rest of the afternoon felt like walking through quicksand. Ava stayed in her room, listening to the sounds of pots clanging and people arriving downstairs. At one point she heard her father laughing with guests, his voice warm in a way she hadn't heard in a long time. When the smell of turkey and cinnamon pie drifted up the stairs, her stomach twisted. She waited until the dining room was full before slipping down to the kitchen to make herself a plate. Carla was there, arranging bread rolls in a basket. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. Not tonight, she said, stepping in front of Ava. I'm just going to eat in my room, Ava said, her voice calm but tight. Carla shook her head slowly. No, you're not joining us at all. Go outside, cool off. Maybe then you'll appreciate what you have. I'm not going outside. But Carla was already opening the front door. She guided Ava forward with a firm hand at her back. Ava stumbled onto the porch, the cold hitting her like a slap. Before she could turn around, the door shut. She heard the lock click. Through the glass, she saw Carla walking back toward the dining room, her shoulders relaxed, like nothing had happened. Inside, the sound of laughter rose again. Outside, Ava stood frozen, realizing she wasn't just being kept from dinner. She was being shut out of the family entirely. The cold made everything sharper. The air, the sounds, the memories she didn't want to think about. Ava stood on the porch, her arms wrapped tight around herself, watching her breath rise and disappear. Her fingers ached, but the ache in her chest was worse. She tried to keep her mind blank, but it didn't work. Every little thing Carla had ever done to push her down came rushing back. The time she'd told Ava her hair looked sloppy, right before school photos. The way she'd forgotten to tell her about a family trip until the night before, then blamed her for not being packed. The afternoons when her father came home tired, and Carla would sigh loudly and say, "You wouldn't believe how rude Ava's been today." Each moment had been small on its own, easy for someone else to dismiss. But now they all stacked up inside her, heavy as bricks. A faint movement caught her eye. One of the curtains shifted, just a sliver, and a small face appeared, her little stepbrother Max. He looked worried, his eyes darting left and right before meeting her. Ava gave him a small smile, hoping it would reassure him. But before he could do anything, someone, probably Carla, pulled him away, the curtain snapping shut again. Ava's stomach tightened. Even Max wasn't allowed to see her for too long. Her phone was dead, so she crossed the porch and stepped into the yard, looking for light. A neighbor's porch lamp glowed a few houses down. She walked quickly, her shoes crunching in the thin layer of snow, and stood under it. The cold metal of the railing bit into her hand as she leaned against it, pulling her phone from her pocket. The battery icon flashed red as the screen lit up. She opened her messages and typed as fast as her frozen fingers allowed. Locked out. Need somewhere to go. She sent it to Lily, praying the signal was strong enough for it to go through. The wait felt endless, but finally her phone buzzed. You need to get out for good. Come to my place. I'll come get you. Ava stared at the message. She wanted to say yes right away, but something held her still. Leaving felt permanent. And part of her, the part that still remembered pancakes and late-night movies, wanted her dad to open the door first. To choose her. She walked back toward the house, standing just far enough away that she could see inside through a small gap in the curtain. The dining room was full of people, their faces bright in the warm light. Carla stood at the end of the table, talking with her hand. Ava couldn't hear every word, but when Carla's voice rose slightly, the room quieted. She chose to be dramatic instead of being part of the family, Carla was saying, her tone light, as if she were telling a silly story. Some of the guests chuckled. Ava froze, waiting for her father to speak up. To say that's not what happened. She didn't choose this. But he didn't. He just smiled faintly and took another sip of his drink. The sound of forks and glasses picked up again. Someone made a toast. Carla laughed at something across the table, and Ava realized this wasn't just Carla being cruel. This was her father letting it happen, over and over again. The truth pressed down on her until she could barely breathe. It wasn't an accident that he didn't defend her. He'd been choosing silence for years, and in some ways, that hurt worse than anything Carla had ever said. She stepped back from the window. The snow was falling harder now, tiny flakes catching in her hair. Her phone buzzed again, Lily asking where she was so she could come get her. Ava typed her location with stiff fingers and hit send. Then she stood there in the yard, watching the warm glow of the dining room fade behind the curtain, knowing that no matter what happened next, headlights cut through the falling snow, growing brighter as a small car slowed in front of the house. Lily leaned over the steering wheel, her worried face glowing in the dashboard light. Ava's chest loosened a little just seeing her. She didn't move right away. She stayed by the porch steps, her fingers curling into the railing. The front door was still closed. A part of her, the part that still remembered her father's promise years ago, kept whispering, "Wait. He'll come. He has to." Lily's car idled at the curb. The wind carried the faint sound of Christmas music from a passing truck, but the house behind her was steady with its warm, muffled noise. Then the door opened. Ava's heart jumped, until she saw it was Carla. She stood there with Ava's coat draped over her arm, her nails painted deep red, a glass of wine still in her other hand. "Merry Christmas," Carla said, her smile wide and empty. She tossed the coat into the snow at Ava's feet like it was trash she'd been meaning to get rid of. Behind her, framed by the light of the dining room, stood Ava's father. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning either, just watching. His hand rested on the edge of the door, but he didn't step forward. He didn't say a word. The cold reached Ava's bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill spreading through her chest. Something inside her, something she'd been holding together for years, cracked wide open. She bent down, picked up her coat, and shook the snow from it. When she looked up, her eyes found his. "You just chose her over me," she said quietly, her voice steady in a way that surprised her. "Forever." His expression didn't change. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he didn't care. Ava slid her arms into the coat, pulled the hood up, and walked toward Lily's car. She didn't let herself look back. If she did, she might start crying right there in the snow, and she refused to give either of them. The door shut behind her, and the sound was final, like the last page of a chapter. Lily's house felt like stepping into a different world. The air was warm, the smell of cookies drifting from the kitchen, and someone had left a blanket folded neatly on the couch for her. No one asked her to explain herself right away. They just made her a cup of tea and told her there was a guest room upstairs if she wanted to rest. For the first time in months, Ava didn't feel like she was in the way. Lily's parents asked how she liked her tea, not where she'd been or why she'd been gone so long. They didn't hover, but they didn't ignore her either. It was a quiet kind of kindness, the kind that made her realize how much she'd been missing it. Over the next week, she let herself breathe again. She slept late some mornings, helped Lily's mom make breakfast, and even joined the family when they went out to see Christmas lights. No one criticized her. No one kept score. One night, she sat at the desk in the guest room, laptop open, and started rewriting her college essay from scratch. It was hard at first. The words felt heavy, like they didn't want to come. But once she started telling the truth about her life, they began to flow. She wrote about change, about loss, about finding her own place in the world when the one she was given shut her out. By New Year's Eve, the essay was finished. She hit submit with a small, proud smile. It wasn't the one she had originally planned, but it was better. It was hers. She didn't speak to her father or Carla again. She blocked their numbers, deleted their emails, and put her focus on what came next. She started picking up extra shifts at the coffee shop where she worked on weekends. Every paycheck went into a savings account labeled apartment. She filled out scholarship applications late into the night, the glow of the laptop lighting up the dark room. It wasn't easy, and the hurt was still there, sometimes hitting her out of nowhere, like when she saw other families laughing together at the store. But instead of letting it crush her, she used it. She told herself that every hour she worked, every form she filled out, was one step farther from the people who had tried to make her small. The pain hadn't gone away, but it had changed. Now, it pushed her forward instead of holding her back. And for the first time in a long time, spring sunlight poured through the windows of the coffee shop, where Ava sat with Lily and a few other friends. They were halfway through sharing a plate of fries when her phone buzzed with an email notification. She almost ignored it until she saw the subject line. Her chest tightened. She opened it, her friends leaning in. Congratulations. The word jumped out at her like it was lit up. She read it again and again, just to make sure it was real. She'd been accepted to her dream university. Lily squealed and pulled her into a hug, the others clapping and cheering. Someone took her phone to snap a picture, and for once, Ava didn't mind being in the center of attention. These people were here because they wanted to be, not because they had to. That night, she walked home from a party with music still ringing in her ears. The air was cool but soft, carrying the smell of fresh grass. She took the long way, not on purpose, and found herself passing her old street. When she reached the house, it looked exactly the same. Warm lights glowing in the windows, shadows moving behind the curtains, faint bursts of laughter drifting into the night. She slowed for just a second, but she didn't stop. She didn't try to peek inside or wonder what they were doing. Instead, she kept walking. Her steps were steady, her head high. The locked door was still there, but it didn't matter anymore. She wasn't on the outside looking in. She was on her own path, heading somewhere they couldn't touch. And as she turned the corner, Ava smiled, knowing she'd never need that house or their approval again. Hey besties, thanks for watching till the end. If you liked Ava's story, be sure to like, share, and drop a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional, binge-worthy dramas. See you in the next one. Her friends invited everyone except her to their girls' trip, so she booked the seat right beside them. Bye!